Hi, hello, welcome to episode 72 of Trail Society, produced by Free Trail, brought to you by The Feed. I'm Corinne Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen.
And we are all not completely in shambles. Our lives are a little bit chaotic right now. I'm home, which is amazing. Keely is sort of home. She's in between homes right now. Hillary's down at a team camp for the cycling. Is it for Pinarello?
Yeah, it's for Pinarello.
Sick. Yeah. So down by Monterey zone.
Yep. I'm in Carmel by the Sea at the moment.
Oh,
nice.
Gosh. That's nice.
Yeah, I spent some time down there. Yeah. Around Sea Otter. It's insane.
It's so insane. I know. I was literally we were shooting this morning and I saw some baby seals with their moms. It was really magical.
You're like, stop the cameras, must see seals. Keely and I just got out of I don't know about you, Keely, but I'm like hungover from the weekend. Gorge weekend was absolutely magical. And we had us like a low key Trail Society takeover of the live commentary in studio early Saturday morning, literally the crack of dawn. Keely drove over from Portland to meet me in a brewery on the third floor where we hosted the live stream for 12 hours. Keely, you had your first ever commentary debut. How was it?
I mean, I learned from the best, so I thought it was pretty fun. Working with you on the live commentary is like so impressive because like, you know, being an audience member on it, you're just like, man, how does she think of all these things to say? And then when you're actually like commentating with you, you're like, okay, it makes sense. Like she's just good at this, but also it was really fun to do it with you because I feel like, you know, we just got to banter for 6 hours or 8 hours or whatever it was. And that was super fun.
Yeah. I told Keely when she arrived, it's just a podcast. It's just a 6-hour podcast. You're going to be fine. We'll get you out of here. JD joined us in studio for a little bit, which was extra special.
I know, it was so fun. Yeah, I was glad to be a part of it. I was bummed I didn't get to hang out longer, but change of circumstance. I was moving as well that weekend, so ended up just having a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah, it was okay. We did miss hugging you. At the same time, we'll talk a little bit about Rachel Drake here in a second, but like she was also there and then she was gone and then she was there again. And I was like, wait, you're here? Wait, weren't you just somewhere else? Like it was a wild weekend of like, you know, I'm not going to say favorites only, but there were a lot of favorites there. It was really fun to get to hug many, many people and still not give out enough hugs. I texted Arden Young this morning and I was like, I didn't get to hug you. Like, I don't think I saw Arden besides like via a camera the entire weekend. So it's all hands on deck. People are getting training in for canyons, for Madeira. People were racing and crewing and helping with the live feed and then jumping back in cars to drive somewhere else. Like it was just really, the community came out in force to pull the thing off, and it was incredibly special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had an athlete who's new to the community in Portland text me afterwards and just be like, this community is amazing. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty special.
Yeah, we got a shout out in, I'm going to pull it up real quick before I totally forget, from one of our Free Trail fam members who was out volunteering on course. He was at the 50K turnaround, Ryan Kennedy. And I was like, oh man, like you all were a blessing out there. And he wrote in to say, I didn't know that you were racing the 50K until I saw you on the starting line on Sunday. And after the last wave left Wakina and we disassembled the start line, I busted my butt to get out to the turnaround. So excitedly wait for all the Free Trail runners, but especially you. Trail Society is how I discovered and eventually joined Free Trail. Without Trail Society, it's unlikely I would have found and gotten involved in this community and subsequently this racing and volunteering business, all of which has very much changed my life for the better. New friends, found family, a great coach, and many shared moments I will never forget. And I was like, dang, we did it, team.
We can retire now.
Yep, we're done.
Oh,
72,
so
last episode. We're out. Just kidding. Speaking really of cool. How this can't be our last episode, though, we have to give a shout out to The Feed, who are our presenting sponsor for this podcast. Keely and I both showed up to the studio with our brand spanking new super sick water bottles. We got so many shout outs out there as well. And I tried a lot of new stuff from The Feed that worked. You know, don't try anything new on race day. I sure tried a bunch of stuff that was new on race day and it all worked out. And that's because in part I got to order, 2 of this gel and 2 of that gel and 3 of these things and some new drink mix and put it all into action. And came out pleasantly surprised, which almost never happens to me. So if you also want to take the, let's call it the shotgun approach of like 7 different gel products for your next 50K, you can do that by going over to www.thefeed.com/Trail Society. And there you get a $20 credit every quarter, which is pretty darn sick. That's several gels. I tried the new carbs. It just says carbs in big letters on it. It's like a 200 calorie packet. They're like $2. They're like the cheapest gel on the market. $20 a credit. That's 10 gels. That's like,
Whoa.
You can't do that anywhere else. So there's that. Eat carbs.
I'll share my carb fueling story a little bit later, but yeah, I also have an athlete who uses the carb gel. She's like, it's so cheap for like if you do it for calorie per cent or cent per calorie.
Yeah, the only thing that's cheaper is like Little Debbie's like oatmeal cream pies. That's like different venture altogether. So again, www.thefeed.com/Trail Society. Get that free credit. Spend some money on us.
Yeah.
But we have to talk about the WNBA. Actually, before we hit record, Keely and I were just like hyping each other up, I'm pretty sure, over like the draft was last night. We're recording this on the 16th. And we were talking about like all the style that got brought by all the players to the draft party. And it was super sick. And like, while we're not here to talk about Caitlin Clark making an appearance on SNL, I want to talk a little, like shine some more light on the WNBA because they're just doing some cool stuff. And part of that is like their values going up. The commissioner of the WNBA, Kathy Engelbert, stated recently that they're looking to double the fees for their media rights in their next round of negotiations. And their current media deal sits about $60 million. And pre-March Madness, they were looking for $80 to $100 million in the next contract cycle. But it seems like that star is very literally rising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really cool to watch. Yeah, and I think there was even, not to go back to Caitlin Clark, but I think that there was a post that showed that Prada basically dressed her head to toe, and it was the first time Prada's ever got involved in anything related to the WNBA before. So like,
or NBA,
so
they'd never
cool.
dressed a male player either.
So just so cool, like the press and the publicity everything's getting now, and it's just like all comes back to like, hey, if you start to invest in something, it will grow. And like, rewind to 2 years ago when we were talking about the private investment that was going into the WNBA. We're kind of seeing those downstream effects now in the college world and in the WNBA world, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, who did you say wants to buy a WNBA team?
Serena Williams wants to buy a WNBA team. So everyone's getting in on women's sports.
Get it. Dylan and Aaron Lutzy have a new podcast called Second Nature. This is a tangent, but important. And it's really great, but it is 2 men talking about the sports industry. And there's definitely things that they miss as 2 men who like absorb these things or don't absorb these things because it's not served up to them via the algorithms, et cetera. And one of them was talking about like athletes who have female athletes who have transcended a sport like independent of gender. And Serena Williams, like the Williams sisters did not come up in that conversation. And I was like, we got some names we can pass along if you'd like. Mr. Dylan Bowman and Aaron Lutzy, but they're doing a great job. But I was like, okay, there's a female lens here that's being completely missed. One of those things I put into the news section was the WNBA has announced a partnership with a birth control pill. And I'm just going to read a little bit from what that press conference said. And it said the WNBA, which has long positioned itself as an advocate on social justice issues, announced a partnership Tuesday with the first FDA-approved over-the-counter daily birth control pill. The drug, O-Pill, fits with the league's stated focus on reproductive health care advocacy during the 2024 season. And then this is a quote from the league's chief growth officer. And it says, at the WNBA, we are committed to addressing issues that matter to the players, and expanding access to reproductive health care is one of those key issues. It's great to be working with a partner whose values align and authentically integrates into the health equity work our players are dedicated to. The press release goes on to say, it's a decisive move as women across the country have lost access to reproductive rights. The same day the league announced the partnership, the Supreme Court of Arizona, home of the Phoenix Mercury, upheld a nearly total abortion ban that was set in an 1864 law. I think that's before Arizona was technically a state. In 12 states, including Arizona, Illinois, and Indiana, which all have WNBA teams, healthcare providers, institutions, or pharmacies can refuse contraceptive care, according to the Guttmacher Institute. The WNBA and OPIL are creating programs targeting college students across the country, and the league announced all this in their most recent press release. And we can link that the frontofficesports.com's kind of press release on this coverage. But I just think it's really cool that it's a women's sports league that is like showing up for what the players care about the most, and just like making, I don't know, just like making a big stand on something that is like very controversial. And people will say don't politicize sports, but it's like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to separate the two when it affects your life and your livelihood and your ability to function as a human, et cetera, when your choices are being taken away.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this trend is obvious when you look back to 2022, where the WNBA launched the addendum around IVF, where they were basically saying they'll reimburse any family up to $60,000 in costs for like adoption, surrogacy, fertility treatments, all of these things. And so obviously they're continuing to advocate in the same realm. And this partnership with birth control company is the next step in that same direction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like these sports, particularly like the women's professional soccer league and now the WNBA, have just like continued to be advocates for some really important initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, yeah, I can't imagine like being hated within your own league type of thing. So it's very cool that they like, instead of shine a light on creating equity across it.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of equity, we're going to dive into some results. And I am really excited. I was texting with a number of people. This result is a little bit old, but remember we record every other week or so. And that's the Umstead 100 mile, where Tara Dower won the race outright. Second fastest women's time ever, behind Devin Yanko's 2022 time. And she also broke the 15-hour mark in that process. And I just think that it's, I don't know, we got to hype these things up, in part because I think it was an outstanding performance by Tara Dower, but because it's kind of a race that has less of a spotlight shined onto it regularly, it could be like completely missed or completely forgotten about. And to run that virtually solo and to actually win the race outright, passing the guy who won the men's race and who ultimately finished second overall, kind of like into the back, kind of like third of the race. I just think it's really, really impressive. So Tara Dower, I don't think you listen to this, but if you do, heck yeah, like what an impressive freaking run.
I think she might, because she shouted out to me once. She's a new teammate of mine on Ultra.
Oh, sick.
So, she did call it out once. So maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. If you do, hi. If not, hi anyways.
Hi. We think you're really amazing, and we can't wait to watch you continue to run to some pretty incredible results, including, going after an Appalachian Trail FKT later this summer, which will be just mega cool to follow. I think she starts in August, so we'll be keeping our eyes peeled on the Tara Dower Appalachian Trail.
Is that a normal start time?
I think it depends on when your permitting is, but I think that could be, you kind of be through like the hottest part of July, et cetera. So, but before snow falls, so you're like you're threading the weather needle a little bit up there.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed on that one. Yeah.
Nice.
We talked a little bit about Gorge, but that's where we had just spent our last weekend. And there are 3 races that happen there. There used to only be 100K, and then a 50K was added. And then in recent years, we've added a 30K to the event. And all 3 races were just like absolutely stacked. In the 30K, we saw Portland's own Rachel Drake just throw down at the front of the race, but she was chased all day by Hannah Allgood and Claire DeVoe. Only 5 minutes separated the 3 of them at the end. And as I mentioned earlier, like these women threw down on Friday, and then like they just like continued to show up all weekend. Rachel flew and presented at a conference, and then all of a sudden I saw her at the 15-mile mark with Lou on Sunday, and I was like, how? I was just like so caught off guard that she was there, because I thought that she was like in a different state at that point.
Yeah, she had a whirlwind of a weekend,
but got it all done. She's like, sorry, I couldn't help with the live broadcast. I was busy. And I was like, yeah, no, duh. Like you clearly very occupied. Hannah also joined our on-course, like in-field correspondent team for Saturday. And Claire crewed friends of ours in both the 100K and 50K. So just like really cool to be involved all weekend long. On the men's side, Matt Daniels took the win by 7 minutes, going under 2 hours on the course. Portland homeboy, Liam Miro. Is it Miro or Miro, Keely? I'm going to forever say this wrong.
I think it's Miro, but I actually don't really know. I should know because I'm his friend, but I don't know if
Liam,
I call him his first and last name. So
Liam, DM us. DM us. Finished second. I think he was a little bit disappointed, but he still PR'd over the year before, etc. Like losing to Matt Daniels is like not a slouchy performance.
Especially Matt Daniels unsponsored is just on a terror. So clearly like that lack of pressure is helping him a little.
I told him to his face that I thought it was I know how frustrating it is, but I think it's one of the best things that could have happened.
I think so too.
And I think he sees that as well now, which is cool. But then in third, another Bowerman guy. Liam's leading the charge here, pulling these road boys, maybe Rachel and Liam, pulling these road boys over to the trail. Andrew Reislerdam, another fast roadie human, jumped into the 30K, finishing third, which is just really cool. First trail race, I think, ever.
Yeah, they both are pulling a lot of the Bowerman team into trail. Like Rachel and I were running the other day, and she's like, I have two girls who are both like wanting to run the Timberline Trail this summer. And my coach is getting like mad at me because he's like, none of these girls are going to want to stay on the track if you keep pulling them to the trails. I'm like, well, it's more fun.
Do it. Join us. I'm going in order distance. On Sunday was the 50K. Sarah Beal, I think, finished fifth overall. When I saw her after the turnaround, I was like, man, this gal is crushing it. So cool to see her to pull off another like really great 50K performance. They both went under the previous course records. Tara Fraga finished second. Lauren Puretz ran an amazing race. I think was as far back as seventh at one point, and then ran her way all the way into third. And I think only finished maybe 90 seconds behind Tara. So it was like pretty tight at the end too. Just like really a closer. So excited to see her at Western States in June. On the men's side, Chris Myers ran away with it. Like no contest, essentially. When I saw him, he was like 7 miles ahead of me at that point. I was like, oh God, okay. This is a whole situation. Looked like it was a walk in the park for him. Dylan Humberger finished in second position. Young Montanan living in Ashland, Oregon. Recently third at Chuckanut. So we'll keep our eyes on Dylan. And then Jared Foreman, Bay Area guy. Really, really cool to see Jared run smoothly there as well. Finished with his dog, his like little tiny dog. It was very cute. On to the 100K, which was Saturday, which used to be the golden ticket race here. I am so hoping that we get a golden ticket back to Gorge at some point. It'd be really cool. Lottie Brinks is on a burner, I want to say. Like her and Matt Daniels, they're both on burners right now, and just like I can't wait to see Lottie at Western States. Found out that she's been coached by Tyler Green since December. Have you been holding that a secret on us, Keely?
Nobody asked. So
so maybe. I'm just kidding.
Maybe it's been a secret. But it's working. And she's obviously very talented, but the way she's racing right now is just really, really cool. Elsa McDonald led the race early, ran an incredibly strong race. Sounds like her legs things just kind of fell apart 60K in, and she held on really spectacularly. But at one point in time, she had almost a 20-minute gap over the field, and Lottie just closed it down, which was just unbelievably impressive. And then Christina Randrup actually was in an epic battle kind of between second and fourth all day long. She ended up in the last 12 miles, moving from fourth into third position. Another Canadian, Andrea Terrace, who lives in Chilliwack, finished in fourth, but quite a tight battle. In the back part of that, the podium was very much up for grabs. Men's side.
Did you get any beta from Christina on where she passed her? Did she ever figure that out? Or because I know she came into Cascade Locks with 5K to go, and she was kind of nervous. She was like, I never passed her. I don't know where she is.
Yeah, I don't know if she pulled off to go to the bathroom or if she took a minor wrong turn. I don't think it was anything major, but it was one of those things where it was it was kind of a weird pass where Christina never saw her on the trail. So I don't know if it was she had stepped off the trail to go to the bathroom or if she and her pacer got a little turned around, but she made it to the finish line safely and in one piece, etc. So that was good. And I think at Cascade Locks, there was a 4-minute gap between the two of them. So it wasn't a major loss having left the turnaround virtually together. And then on the men's side, Brandon Miller went out hard early and I think struggled to get it done. Finished kind of well back in the men's top 10. And I think that he should be really proud for finishing it. I don't think he listens to this either, but if you do, dude, getting a hard day done is a really big deal. And I think that deserves as big of a shout out as the podium. You took a big swing at the front and it just didn't quite pay out. It got quite warm in the sun. And we saw a lot of guys in particular kind of crumble in that over the last kind of like 15 miles of the day. Adam Loomis ran a really smart race. His biggest win in the trail running world, I would say. He's known more as a skier and kind of just a mountain human. So a very runnable course for Adam Loomis to show up on and throw down. He held off a hard charging Elliot Cardin, a guy out of Quebec who is very solid, but just like hasn't stuck the landing. And this felt very close to sticking the landing for Elliot Cardin. So excited to see what he can do. And then a Pennsylvanian, Andrew Simpson, like went from, I think, 5th or 6th to 3rd in one aid station because there were just like all these dudes like laying on the ground, just complete carnage. And he left and Yassine was like, "You're in 3rd." And he's like, "What?" And Yassine's like, "Yeah." And he just like kind of like motored his way out of the aid station, which was really
yeah,
but
he ran such a smart race. Yeah, and I think it was really fun to commentate with you, Corinne, on the women's race, especially because I feel like we kept commenting on little things that ended up like telling a really good story. Like we'd be like, Lottie is not in the top 2. She's taking a lot of time at the aid stations. And like, I think at one point we were even like, that's really smart. Like it clearly doesn't end up taking that much extra time, even though it feels like it does. And like that clearly paid off. Which is really cool. And just even talking to Tyler, he's like, she's just such a smart racer. Like it's not even all my doing. It's just like, she just has really good intuition, and is patient. And again, that is so unnecessary for states. So it's going to be really cool to see her there.
Yeah, they asked Elsa at the finish line if she had any advice for Lottie for Western states. And Elsa was like, she's clearly got it dialed. Like she's clearly got a great strategy. Like she should 100% practice what she did here again, and she's going to be in a great place. Like don't get caught up in the competition. Yep. Do your thing. It was like a very precious moment between the two of them.
Yeah, and also like so humbled too. I was texting her after the race, and she just like was like, "Yeah, I went for it, and then."
Didn't work.
I know
we're kind of teasing Hannah Allgood. We're like, Hannah, like how fast is Elsa gonna run? Because she was like 10 minutes under course record pace at one point in time, and we thought it was gonna go down, and it just the wheels came off, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, but still such a good race. So very cool for Elsa. She's also 43 years old, I think. So.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she's 43, and Andrea, who finished 4th, is 40. So it was two 40-year-olds, and then a 25-year-old and a 28-year-old in the women's top 4. So it was a very cool race.
Yes,
there's hope for us yet.
Yeah, Corinne, how did you feel on your 50K? I know on the commentary you were kind of like, yeah, I would be lying if I said this is ideal, like to basically run a 100-mile ultra the day before 50K in regards to how long you're talking and how little sleep you get. How did it go for you out there? Like, what are your big learnings?
Yeah, I think a couple things. And so one, it's not a great idea, and that's okay. I like knew that going into it and wasn't like, okay, I need to crush this race. Limited sleep Friday night was not great. And then you use a lot of energy being on for 12 hours, which is exciting and fun, and I enjoy it immensely. But I went for a shakeout at like 6:30, just like a 3-mile shakeout run. And I was like, ooh, okay, yeah, no, things are weird feeling. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. But then I also think that I had a moment like you, Keely, where you kind of had a weird day crewing and helping out with Black Canyon 100K and then turned around to run the 60K the next day. Like I ate really good for me historically. But I do think that I needed to eat more, which is great. And I was so impressed with like my ability to just be like, yeah, that gel now in the mouth, in the stomach, no questions asked, no panic, just like made it happen. And could really feel like my energy stabilize when gels were going in. Needed more though, needed more calories, needed like some more carbs to hold some of that over. And I could feel, I joked on my Strava that I like bonked 12 times, got 11 wins, like coming back. And my last win did not happen in the final 2 miles like I would have hoped for. I definitely hiked. I walked fast, this tiny little up the bike path, because I was like, there's no one around me. It was like, it's like that part that's shaded that you can't see the road yet. And you're just like out in the middle of the woods and on this bike path by yourself. And there was no one around. And I was like, I'm going to walk this uphill. I can't right now. So, it was not ideal. I think I was over 60 grams per hour, which for me is like really good. But definitely needed to be probably more in the like 75 to 80 range. And it's just cool. It's cool to see that and cool to experience it and be like, okay, like I know where I can push this. And particularly in the shorter races where my heart rate for me is just really elevated most of the race, I'm just very glycolytic and just burning carbs really fast. So
yeah, cool. Congrats.
back
That's
to
a
the
huge
drawing
win.
board. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
really good.
Yeah, it's like Corinne didn't rely on Coca-Cola for 5 hours. That's
That's
great. That's
so great.
amazing.
It's a big step for you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, big step. Well, we have to give final shout outs to the Lake Sonoma 50 mile and marathon. First, Francesco Pupi won the men's race by nearly 80 minutes in 6:30.
Dominated. He was just running by himself the whole time. It was really cool to see.
Yeah, just completely by himself.
Oh yeah,
because like historically, like women's times that like Keely has run there. I've had a horrible day at Lake Sonoma and still run like nearly the second place men's time there. So it's just kind of crazy that like fields are different every year.
But it was also, this is a slightly different course, I guess.
Yeah, the course changed 2 years ago.
And also the conditions were really sloppy. Like oh my gosh, it was like, man, I felt like I was skiing out there. Like it was just literally, it's like really heavy mud and then just like super slip and slides. It was really hard to get traction, obviously on the downhill, but even on the uphill, you would just like be sliding. It was like you were just kind of like the cartoon character with like spinning your wheels. So and I don't know if people made the wrong shoe choice, because I think typically there you can get away with wearing kind of a road flat, but I think I don't know, but it was just some extra.
It was muddy.
It was very muddy, and it was raining the whole night, like an inch of rain the night before, and then it was kind of constantly in and out of showers the whole day.
Which makes Francesco's time like
really impressive.
Really impressive.
Yeah. And he, like when I saw him, he was basically, he had about 10, 20 minutes gap on the second place guy. And that was probably around mile 30. So in the last 20 miles, he really he just stayed really steady.
Yeah. And you have to reflect too that like Francesco is like one of the best 50K to 80K runners in the world. And like that shows too. Which is cool.
Yeah, but it was cool that he stayed over because he really wanted to do some American races. So chucking it and then staying for this one was cool.
Yeah, he's been in the States for a while now, which is sick. I like that. The big long trip, get a couple of races in. Lindsay Allison won the women's race in a tight battle with Anna Fisher. They both finished in about 8:44 or so. And then the day before, Hillary, did you guys run the marathon on Friday or was it Saturday?
No, we got to that's why I was able to see some of the battle happening in the 50. We ran the marathon on the same day. So we started a couple hours later than the 50 milers. So we got to go through all like the muddy footsteps and like the slip and slide after the 50 milers had been through it. But yeah, it was really cool because Gina Lucrezi is now the race director out there, and they have a women's half marathon on Friday, which is the women's only half marathon on Friday. And then we had the marathon, and then the 50 miler on the same day on that Saturday. So no, that was really cool. And yeah, so I got third, which is awesome. So Brittany Charbonneau, she got first, and Abigail Swift, she got second. It was actually kind of cool because it's hard for me to do these like runnable races. So it's like you said earlier, Corinne, it's like these shorter races. I feel like I have to really focus on trying to like keep the pedal down like the whole time. Yeah, like run. I'm like, I don't get any hiking breaks. I literally like you don't do any of that. So that was really cool. And like in mile, we were all kind of there's like about 5 of us that started together, and then it kind of started to separate out. But Abigail had passed me kind of early on, and then it was nice to just try to focus to like, reel her in. And then by the end, I saw her at the very end, and I couldn't close it, but it was only 30 seconds at the end before. It was so fun. I think she saw me. She's like, "Oh man, you made me really sprint to the finish." I was like, well, I couldn't run any faster. So, but no, it was really fun out there. And even though like it was just wet and cold, everyone had it was just really fun. It was really good energy. And there was someone on the start line, actually 2 people who were, being like, "I love your guys' podcast." And then just out there on the trail, being able to kind of pass the tail end of the 50-mile race. It was just, everyone was just having so much fun. And it's just like such a cool community. So being able to kind of exchange cheers and high fives with, people on the trail, I actually kind of like that whole out and back feel where there's a lot of, you don't feel like you're so alone out there.
Yeah, huge shout out to race director Gina LaCruzzi for making Lake Sonoma continue to shine in a big way. And I hope that in future years too, without a golden ticket being present there, but maybe some like US team qualifying, et cetera, it continues to put a spotlight there, because it does feel like it's kind of like really up and down as far as like who shows up at that race. And April's packed. There's a lot of stuff going on, which definitely makes that more complicated.
Right.
Before we dive into our interview for today, we have to give a shout out to John over at For the Long Run podcast, exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. Boston Marathon Monday was yesterday. And because of that, there's a lot of really cool kind of bonus episodes out on his podcast right now. An interview with Meb, actually last week on one of my runs, I listened to his interview with Amelia Boone, which I really, really enjoyed. And so if you're looking for a new podcast to add to your rotation, something new to add to your midweek run or your weekend long run, go over and give For the Long Run a listen. Give him click the subscribe button. Leave him a review, but really, really enjoying some of the recent interviews he's been putting out. And if you want to dive way back in the archives, you can dive back as far as, I think, episode 20 for me, episode 73 for Hillary, and episode 42 for Keely. Can't promise what you'll find back there since they're way back in the archive, but go give it a listen today. Emily Krauss, that's who our interview's with today, and she is just a ray of sunshine. I wanted to talk to her for many, many hours. Keely, did you want to talk to her for many, many hours?
Oh my gosh, we both said during the pod that like we could literally have her on quarterly.
Yeah, and I think there might be some truth to that. I think that we're going to deep dive into some topics with her in the future, but this will give you a lot of background on who Dr. Emily Krauss is. She's a clinical assistant professor at Stanford's Children's Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Center, and she trained specifically in the specialty of physical medicine and rehabilitation, oftentimes referred to as PM&R, sports medicine discipline. Emily is also the director of the FASTR program, which stands for Female Athlete Science and Translational Research, an acronym she came with on a run, I might add. And that group seeks to close the gender gap in sports science research with an emphasis on early identification and interventions to prevent injury and identify ways to optimize performance in female athletes. To continue to sing her praise, we got to give a shout out that she is a very proud dog mom. Her Vishla is super cute. And she's also completed 9 marathons, including the Boston Marathon twice, and has done 1 50-kilometer ultramarathon. She is a passionate person in the sport, and I feel very honored to get to call her a friend. She loves running, she loves biking, and just staying physically active. They're her personal passions, and she also recognizes the importance of fitness for overall well-being and the prevention of chronic medical conditions. This is a long-ranging, windy conversation with Emily, but we hope to have her on again in the future. So without further ado, Dr. Emily Krauss.
Hello, my name is Emily Krauss. I'm a sports medicine physician and researcher at Stanford. I specifically focus on female athlete research, and I take care of female athletes in my clinic. So there's a lot of overlap of one informing the other. I'm also a runner. I'm a cyclist. I love the trails. I like getting out on my mountain bike for not too technical mountain biking, and just like to be adventure ready, whatever that means based on the season, what my friends are up to, and try to use the outdoors as an activity outlet and a social outlet, a mental outlet. And I am so excited to be on this podcast with Keely and Corinne with Trail Society. I just admire you both on so many levels, and I enjoy our side conversations when we just get to nerd out and just have a deep dive on a number of different topics. So I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us.
I know, I love it. And sorry to our cat parents out there. Emily is a proud dog mom as well. We gotta give the pup a shout out. I know that she's been out running with you too.
It's so funny. She was trying to eat a paper towel right when I hopped on the Zoom, and I was like, oh my gosh, I might have to pause and just like take a time out so that I can remove the paper towel from her mouth. She's 8 months. She's a Vishla, so we're still working on her putting things in her mouth. But we love her, and she's going to be our little trail partner soon. Chris, my husband, is doing a great job of teaching her trail etiquette, and I'm working on it as well.
I love it. Someone has to be like the good cop, bad cop, you know,
Yeah.
someone's got to be the fun dad and the strict mom, or vice versa. We have that argument in our house too. Someone's safety. You're probably safety mom and he's probably fun dad.
I'm always the bad cop. I'm always the one that has to train them and do all the bad stuff. And JT comes home and he's like, snuggle with me.
Yes. We experience that a lot. I feel like Chris takes her, so he's taking her up to Tahoe this weekend, for example, and then she's just going to play in the snow. And then sometimes she learns some other habits when she goes out on those fun weekend adventures. So then we have to retrain how to walk on the leash again and how to not pull and tug. But it's fun. It's a nice new challenge for us. And we're learning a lot about communication and task switching and sharing of roles and responsibilities with a little furry animal. Feels like a human.
Yeah, little fur baby. We love fur babies. It was really funny when Keely sent you the email and it was like very formal. It was like, "Hi, Dr. Kraus," and I was like, "Oh, it's Emily!" Like, yay! And it's like, I want people to like kind of, you know, like some people will watch this on YouTube, but many people will just be listening to this on their long run over the weekend. And I want you guys to put in mind that yes, Dr. Emily Krauss is a complete badass, but she's also like the world's like most fun human being. So if you get the honor, privilege, joy of getting to work with Emily in research, in the field, in a medical mystery, you're in good hands, and she's going to be a delight the whole time. I recently actually ran into you at Further in Palm Springs, where you were the medical lead for Lululemon's project there. And I thought you were perfect for it. I was like, oh, it's Dr. Lululemon. I love this. But can you tell us a bit about your role in the project, kind of pre, during, and post Further? And if there was anything really unexpected about working on such a non-standard event?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, my response to the email was far from professional. I think there was maybe some all caps in there, some like 5 exclamation points. And I was so excited to be on the podcast and just be able to talk with you both that I think that the true personality of me came out very quickly in the email. So regarding Further, wow, that was by far the most unique experience. Definitely, I'd say a life-changing experience for me in certain contexts from a professional standpoint. It was the first time that I really worked with an industry-led event and doing event coverage that was led by Lululemon. The event planners was this group called DEMSI. They're pretty well-known in event planning and races specifically.
The Boston Marathon.
The Boston Marathon. So they have a lot of experience, but this was taking them out of their comfort zone with this idea, going to a remote location in the desert and really building this event and creating this event that was like no other, and was for 10 women, was 10 racers, and they ran further than they had, or tried to run further than they'd ever run before. About 6 months prior to the event, which was performed, or which took place in March, I was contacted by Dempsey specifically through Lululemon about the possibility of being one of the medical directors. And I was incredibly excited and honored, but I was also really disclosed some of my own limitations with my own past experience. I don't have a ton of race and medical event coverage, especially like something like Further. And so I wanted to pull in some other experts. And so they had another physician they'd worked with in the past, Scott Goldberg. So big shout out to Scott. He's a emergency medicine physician at Harvard, and he's worked with some of the events with Dempsey before. He had that emergency medicine and event coverage, mass event coverage experience. And then I also reached out and suggested Dr. Andy Pasternak. He is the medical director of Western States, a lot of street cred in the ultra and trail running community. And I was like, the three of us, I think, can bring something unique to the table. I work with female athletes. I work with runners. I really want to be that go-to person when they do have questions, whether leading up to the event, because I wanted to connect with them before and learn about their health goals, learn about what they were really wanting to, what they were concerned about, and also their communication style during the event, a 6-day event. They want me and all the medical team talking to them. So they want us to talk to part of their crew And as Corinne was a member of a crew, there was just a really good dynamic between medical and each team that built throughout the 6 days. So I actually forgot all of your specific questions about the event, but some big takeaways for me. Well, one, leading up to the event, I was concerned. This is something that this event is the longest event that is focused just on women, and I wasn't sure what could occur. And so we were prepared for everything, for electrolyte disturbances, different casualties, falls, storms, all the different potential natural disasters that could happen. In fact, there was a big windstorm that happened the weekend before that really threw off the setup. But thankfully, there weren't any big windstorms during the event besides some windier days, but they were still able to continue to race. But then I was also concerned about overuse injuries, running a I don't know the exact number, but
2.524 or something.
Thank you. 2.524-ish lap repetitively, that they had to stay in one direction just due to the logistics of recording. And they wanted to make sure and accurately capture all those distances, all those records. It's going to take a toll on the body. And what kind of toll would it take? Would it be an MSK, like a soft tissue injury? I'm mostly concerned, or a lot of athletes come to me for bone stress injuries or overuse bone injuries, so stress reaction, stress fractures. Would there be stress reaction, stress fracture risk? Would there be other GI issues? I mean, we were trying to prepare for everything. We did have a lot of resources. Canadian Sports Institute Pacific were there doing research. And so they were able to capture some data, but we wanted to have our own data that we had immediate access to. And so we were able to, if we needed to collect blood right away, we could do that. We were interacting with the athletes often. We were making records of any medications that were needed and that were taken. And what blew my mind was on day 6 of the event, every woman was still moving and running. Nobody dropped. And that I just expected, and I was prepared for at least some level of attrition, so a little bit of dropout with athletes. And honestly, I mean, look at other events as far as like the number of dropouts or the number of finishers. I don't know any others that have a 100% completion rate. So it was really exciting to see that, and a relief from the medical side that we didn't have to manage any medical emergencies, send anyone out to kind of get treatment. But we were ready, and there were some hiccups throughout the event. There were athletes who had some aches and pains and issues that we did have to triage, and we were able to navigate them well and reassure the athlete that we weren't just going to pull them, shut them down, that we were going to have this continued conversation. And I think that's the beauty of a 6-day event, is athletes were able to manage their volume if they needed to be able to get to day 6. And we saw those. I'm not going to leak any of the stats or any of the numbers and labs, but it was really interesting to see some of the trends in the biomarkers throughout the event, because they were most of these athletes were getting some blood work throughout the event for research purposes. And I'm just shocked that there weren't any more concerning values that we had to navigate.
Yeah, so there were some like tiny medical oopsies, but they were like it was like trouble. Like, I mean, we know that Leah's been public about like being worried about like she was having chest pain. She ended up getting like, you guys did an EKG in the back of like the medical tent, and they were like, I think this is intercostal pain, and they like taped her breast tissue, and so that like she had like less jostling and less intercostal like muscular pain. And was totally fine. So it's fascinating. One thing that's been brought up a lot, and I know that this will come out in the research down the road, and we're so excited to talk to Trent down the road, yourself again, et cetera, is we know that there were pre and during measures taken. And I know that there were some post measure taken within 24 to 72 hours post-event. Are there any longer term data that's going to be collected on the women that took part? Just because it's like, you know, I think most of us are saying like, cool, like nothing happened to them horribly in 6 days or 3 days after, but what does that look like longitudinally, 3 months out, 6 months out, et cetera?
Yeah, and well, I'm so glad that you brought up Trent. Shout out to Trent Stellingwerf and his team. They 30 had researchers. Quite the orchestra of research team members, from biomechanics to wearables to other like load monitoring to sleep monitoring. And to answer your question, I'm not sure of all the follow-ups. There is a follow-up survey that each athlete is participating in and will take. But as far as other collections, I'm not sure. I hope that sometimes you can do some modifications and kind of add that to the IRB. So I'm hoping that maybe they can, if they hadn't had that part of their initial plan, that they can potentially add that to the study design.
Yeah, I'd just be curious, right?
Yeah,
You're like, what does thyroid stuff look like? Like if we're worried about metabolic stuff, long term, et cetera.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness,
where my brain goes to. It's so cool what you guys did.
All the gears are turning.
We're
going to back things up a little bit and talk to you about the fact that you're a clinician and researcher at Stanford. I have actually made it down to your office at Stanford and been like, yes, I am 30 years old. Yes, I am in the pediatric clinic here to see Dr. Kraus. But like, can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up in medicine and what led you to focus specifically on sports medicine and now really like hemmed into the female athlete research side of sports medicine as well?
Oh, good question. Should we start from the beginning?
Let's start from Nebraska. Let's go.
Well, let's start from Nebraska. I'll keep a timer so I don't get too deep into the history and my childhood year by year chronologue. So I was born in a small town in Nebraska, population 5,000. We're the Holdridge Dusters. Shout out to me, probably my mom who might be listening. And I was like one of those rare birds who by middle school, 7th or 8th grade, I got exposed to some really cool science teachers and was like, I love science. I love health science. I want to do something in health science. And a doctor sounds cool. And I had some really cool family medicine doctors that I shadowed and got exposure to, interestingly, all male. And did some shadowing when I was in high school, got exposure to an orthopedic surgeon who would come down and visit our small town, Nebraska, from big town Lincoln, Nebraska. And
that's how our clinic worked too growing up.
Yeah. He would come once a month and he'd have a clinic. He would go in to the OR and do these cool surgeries. And I was able to like go in the OR and observe. And I know that's pretty rare, just thinking about that now with all the med students or students that reach out to us and some of the restrictions that we just have within our hospital. But I had that unique opportunity really early. And I was like, this is cool. I like the orthopedic side. I like MSK issues. I was a pretty avid athlete. I did 3 sports through high school, kind of 4 sports. I did a 4th sport in the summertime and just was super active. And at that point, I was still had the idea of wanting to be an orthopedic surgeon and thought I wanted to be a team physician for a football team because that was kind of my lens. And that was kind of where I could envision who I saw and what I was exposed to and where I could picture myself in the future to kind of staying in sports medicine. So fast forward, got through college, was pre-med, did all the pre-med things, went to University of Nebraska-Lincoln, was a nutrition science major, which is really like full circle because I've still thinking about nutrition and my day-to-day clinical and research life. And then went to med school at University of Nebraska Medical Center. So that means like I've been in Nebraska for like 25 years by this point. But I have 2 older brothers that live in California. And I was like, California's cool. There's a lot of excitement there. There's warmth. There's an ocean. There are a lot of really great universities. And so I was always looking west. And finally, in med school, if you're still on track with this history, I was still in an orthopedic surgery vision and mindset. And then I did my rotations, realized that orthopedic surgery wasn't really my fit. I didn't love the OR. I really liked the clinic where I could see an athlete or see an individual and be like, what are your goals? How did you get here? What shoes are you wearing? What are some of the other risk factors? And I wanted more time to go deep into all those discussions. And I realized that if that was my goal, orthopedic surgery probably isn't the right fit. And also because the OR wasn't really for me. So I pivoted, somehow did some soul searching, did some more career, talking to a lot of other physicians, again, mostly male, and found the field of physiatry or physical medicine and rehab, which is a field that's not as known for, especially in the Midwest or in Nebraska. And they take a comprehensive approach to an individual and a patient, really trying to optimize their functional status. And they see spinal cord injuries, traumatic brain injuries, concussions, and athletes. And so I loved the variety, and I loved how they took a team approach to an individual's care. Fast forward, I was able to land at Stanford.
After that $1,000 interview.
Oh my gosh, yes. I forgot I shared this with you. There was a snafu in the interview process, and I didn't get an invite to Stanford. And this was this moment where Nebraska Emily, not super kind of aggressive with follow-ups. I was like, this doesn't feel right. But I don't know. I'm going to follow up and reach out to some people that I had talked to and that I rotated with when I was at Stanford, because I had such an overwhelmingly positive experience there. And James Crew, who's also an Omaha native, Nebraska native, he reached out to the interview committee, and they were like, "Oh, we made a mistake. Will you come next week to interview at Stanford?" Or within like a week or two. And I was like, "I will. Yes." I looked at the price of the flight, and it was around $1,000. And I was like, I don't care. This is worth it. And so flew out there. And we just, before we recorded this, we were just talking about how expensive it can get, and like the med school debt and the debt. But at that point, I was like, this is an opportunity. I got to take it. And fast forward, matched at Stanford, incredible opportunity. Not a lot of people from Nebraska or the Midwest get that opportunity. And I recognized that right away. And I was like, I'm not going to blow it. And did my sports medicine fellowship at Stanford. And within that time, which was about a 5-year time frame, I got into research for the first time. I did a little bit, I dabbled when I was in med school, but it was like looking at hip x-rays and looking at prostheses and just trying to get some type of exposure. But now I was able to hone in on sports medicine. Dr. Michael Fredrickson is still a mentor of mine, and he pulled me into a research study that they were doing on collegiate athletes at Stanford and UCLA. And that was like Stanford and UCLA runners looking at bone stress injuries, the female athlete triad, which I don't know if you've talked about. We can go into definitions.
We will, don't worry.
Or you can reference an older podcast. I know you've talked about menstrual cycle before. And it was so interesting. Finally, we're studying female athletes. Finally, we're studying injury risk. And that was my jam. And it started to increase from there. Pulled in Dr. Megan Roach when she was med student Megan Roach at the time as our research coordinator. So I got to take off my research coordinator hat and hand it to her. And that study was 8 or 9 years long as far as the longitudinality of it, which was a great learning experience. We learned a lot from just the data that we captured, and it helped jumpstart a lot of the research that I'm doing currently. So I guess where I am now is I split my time about 50-50 between being a sports medicine physician, focusing on female athletes of all ages. So even though I'm at Stanford Children's, since I did my residency training seeing adults, and then focused a lot of my sports medicine fellowship seeing kids and young athletes, I've been able to really straddle both worlds. And I love it because I love to see the longitudinal nature of growth and development and what the different experiences an athlete may have as a 16-year-old. And then, friend, I'm not going to guess your age, 30-year-old.
Yeah, old enough that your clinic was like a little weirded out when I walked into Stanford's pediatric hospital in San Francisco to like mail to upload images there to get my MRI to you. They were like, "Who's the patient?" And I was like, "I'm the patient." And they're like, "What's your birthday?" And I was like, 1990. And they were like, "Okay, sure." And just like uploaded the images. So yeah, you definitely treat a full spectrum of humans. But I'm sorry, I'm kind of cutting you off, but I'm really curious just to touch on a little bit of this, like a lot of your experiences as a high school student, as a college student, as a medical student, as a resident, you had a lot of male mentors, a lot of like, those were your peers, those were your peer mentors, your, the direction that you wanted to head in medicine was kind of guided by those individuals. And I'm wondering, has that representation particularly in sports medicine in general, for women, has that grown or changed or evolved? Do you find that like your own role is like helping evolve that for kind of like the future clinicians coming up? Because I do think it's been a very male dominated field for, I want to say millennia, but that's not accurate, obviously. Forever.
Yeah, for a very long time, forever. Yeah, so I'm glad you caught that trend, and I wanted to make sure to highlight that because it was hard trying to imagine myself in a future career or that dream position when it really there wasn't another woman that I found to really I could model after. And I mean, I'm very fortunate. The mentors that I do have and that I did have during those stages were really valuable and provided a lot of great insight. But it's not the same. And I definitely throughout those stages got pushback from a lot of different people, mentors, friends, sometimes even family members that are like, are you sure you want to go into medicine? What about building a family? What about this, and this? And this is a long road. This is a big commitment. And fortunately
like
for me,
I feel all of this.
Fortunately, that just like lit the fire even more. And I was like, yes, I do. I have a plan and I'm going to stick with this plan. And to some degree, it almost like reinforced blinders too. So I think my word of caution or word of advice is trying to still stay an open mind, because sometimes that like makes me really stubborn and I like makes me want to just do this thing even more, even though maybe I should keep expanding and sampling and dabbling. But it worked for me. And I have no regrets about the path that I chose. To your point, as far as where are we now, there has been growth, and there are definitely more women mentors out there, women leaders in medicine, outside of medicine. And that's been huge for me to just talk to women, share notes. But I feel like historically that hasn't always been the case. And there's been like one woman. And sometimes that one woman is like, there's only room for one woman at this table. And so it sometimes can get a little hostile isn't the right word, but a little territorial as far as who gets to show up at the table. And I think now we're realizing that, the table could be surrounded by all women, and that wouldn't be bad either. And so I will say that it's changed. I do have some great mentors that have, I would say, kind of more middle career mentors that are women, but I still struggle sometimes. And I think that's sometimes where I've communicated, I've shared with a lot of people that I just wish that there were more women mentors for those middle and late career women to work with. But as far as the future is looking bright. If it has anything to reflect like the number of emails I get from female med students, even just like later career and their interest in maybe pivoting. And I try my best to make time for them. For example, one student, Kaylee Blevins, she's a med
I was
student.
just going to say Kaylee Blevins. She's in Colorado. We tried really hard to get her into a California medical school to keep her in the Bay, but she's in Colorado. But I have a feeling residency will pull her back to the Bay Area, either to Stanford or UCSF or something of that nature.
That is my hope. And Kaylee Blevins, I'm giving a shout out. She
might listen to this. Yeah.
Maybe I'll send her a link. Be like, hey, at minute 30 something or 20 something, you're getting a shout out. But she reached out and I chatted with her and probably shared a lot of what I just shared in my journey. And I realized how valuable that is for just even to hear, even if the pathway and that journey is different from maybe what that individual is experiencing, it's still nice because there are struggles. It wasn't always clear. It required some pivoting. And I think that's helpful to hear, and not to normalize, but just to have people relate to. And I think that especially right now with just this pressure and I think the workforce is tough, and medicine is a really long road. So being able to be able to take that plunge, you need some people to be like, this is the right decision. You're on the right track. This is going to be rewarding, and you can find your dream job within that career trajectory. And I will say, like, I love my job. I love splitting work between the clinical and the research, and the outreach, I would say too, has been really rewarding.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking, the year my husband matched into residency, one of our friends in his medical school class is an orthopedic surgery resident at UCSF now, Natalie. And they took 5 interns that year for that residency group. And it was 4 women and 1 guy. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, we were all like, yeah. And I think Natalie was the only UCSF medical student that made it into that group. But yeah, it was just like really, really cool. So there is change. There is change happening. We've highlighted. Sorry, go.
I was just going to say, I think we've talked about this a lot on the podcast too, of like, when you're the only female, it's really hard to like understand that like a rising tide will raise all ships, because you're like, no, there's no space. But I think as you see more people getting into the field, just like we see more women getting into trail running, you realize that in order to like enhance the field, you do have to rise up other women. Otherwise, like, it's just not going to advance. And so it's really cool to see that like that's where the trend is now, where there's enough women in it that they're realizing that they all can succeed together. It doesn't have to be like a dog eat dog world, which is similar in trail right now. Cool.
The scarcity mindset has been really, really prevalent in a lot of things. I feel that on like the commentary side. I'm like, yes, no, more. Like, we had an all-female commentary team for the Black Canyon 60K, and that was like the first time I've gotten to experience that. Keely will be joining me on the mic during the Gorge 100K, and it's like really fun to not be like, oh, Corinne and the boys. It's like a bunch of people, a bunch of women in particular, getting behind the mic as well. We wanted to talk quickly about FASTR. It's a program that we've highlighted here on the podcast a number of times, but I think a lot of people are probably going to be unfamiliar with the organization and kind of how that ties into the research that your group does based out of Stanford and kind of a couple other institutes. And I'm wondering what the aim of that program is and how things are going with it.
Yeah. I have not brought up FASTR yet, but I was hoping to be able to have an opportunity to help kind of explain what it is. So FASTR stands for Female Athlete Science and Translational Research. I thought of the name on a run, which just very fitting for the program. And when I talk about really key moments in career development and growth, the development of FASTR was another key time point. And it was thanks to this initiative called the WUSI Human Performance Alliance, which is a 6-institution initiative that is focused on health and performance and human performance, and trying to identify these underlying principles that define human performance, from like lab-based research to real translational research that's going to have more immediate clinical impact. And one of the facets and areas that they are focusing on is the female athlete. And at that point, Stanford didn't have a true female athlete research program. I got contacted by Dr. Kate Ackerman, who is another mentor, and she's probably been cited or referenced in research, or just referenced even her research program, the female athlete program at Boston Children's Hospital. And she was like, Emily, I think you would be a great fit to direct this program. And I was like, this would be a dream opportunity. What do I need to do? And so I started to build some relationships, have some conversations with people at Stanford. They felt that I was the right fit. And so I started to build this program pretty much from scratch. One of the first members of the team that I brought in was Megan Roach. She was getting her PhD at the time, but she was like, this sounds amazing. She was all in. And the focus of the research program, to kind of go back to that aim, is we wanted to try and close the gap in female athlete research, both research and translation. That sounds very broad, which it is. There are a lot of gaps in female athlete research, from pregnancy and training in pregnancy to just anything female athlete performance, I would say, is just still super limited. And so we narrowed our areas to more running, areas that we're really familiar with: running, bone health, and really thinking about translation as well. How are we going to get the information out, and what's going to hit and stick with athletes? And is that going to hit and stick differently with a high school female athlete than a 20, 30 something? What about a perimenopausal athlete? I mean, that's a whole nother area of research that's just is totally uncovered and understudied. So we're starting narrow, but we want to continue to build out. And another area of focus that is in the ultra endurance population. And some people might say that that's niche, but I would say that the ultra endurance group is growing, and we can see even just the conversations within Trail Society and what you're seeing as far as trends, the level of athleticism in the elite and the pro racers, and just the number of people that are running. You can see this growth and movement. I also think that they're a unique population because they're stressing and putting their body at the extremes of putting their bodies at the limits. And what is the response? Is that a healthy response? Is that a response that we can manage better with different interventions, different education on nutrition. And I think, Keely, I'm sure we could do a whole separate podcast on that alone, back to like bookmarking podcasts as far as nutrition considerations, especially with the female ultra endurance runner, and making sure that we're not just taking something that's been traditionally used for a male runner and just whatever, they pink it and shrink it, or whatever another version of that you want to say for a female runner. And I think we deserve more. We deserve to be able to perform at our best, and that's going to require better research, better methodology. I know you talk about menstrual cycle a lot, but incorporating the menstrual cycle into research and not being afraid of it, and making sure that you invest in those athletes and in that quality of research in order to get better outcomes.
Yeah, there is movement in this area, which has been, championed by the likes of the FASTR program and Katie Ackerman, who you mentioned, who's, I think, is a role model for many of us. But we spent a lot of time on the podcast in general talking about low energy availability and relative energy deficiency in sport, or RED-S. And I'd love to hear you reflect on your role as a clinician and researcher around the relationship of low energy availability and bone stress injuries. Like, what is that? There seems to be an obvious relationship, but I'm wondering, as a clinician and then as a researcher, what that relationship looks like.
Yeah, I think we've been fortunate to see trends in the research on low energy availability and its relationship with bone health over the last 20 or 30 years, starting, I guess we'll start with triad, the female athlete triad. Back in the 1980s, Dr. Barbara Drinkwater, who has since passed, but she, as a clinician, was recognizing this trend of female athletes presenting with a bone stress injury, but also having menstrual dysfunction, so missed periods, and also some level of potentially disordered eating behaviors or eating disorder behaviors. And she defined that as the female athlete triad. Over time, that definition evolved over the next 10, 20, 30 years, I guess, doing the math. And now there's more of this spectrum or interrelationship of those three, of low energy availability with or without an eating disorder. Something important to keep in mind, that some of these athletes might be overtraining, underfueling inadvertently, sometimes through like changes in a previous podcast, we were just talking about changes in training, changes in even just elevation or the intensity of training, even just changes in athletes as they're growing through big developmental changes through puberty. So that's one of the cornerstones that can lead to hormonal suppression or hormonal dysfunction. Without getting too deep into the physiology and the different pathways, there are certain hormones suppressed, like estrogen, other sex hormones as well, which then affect your period, affect a female athlete's period. And that could be a lighter period. It could be these more subtle changes, or it could be a more obvious change of a missed period. And then over time, that hormonal suppression, specifically the most impactful would be estrogen, is going to affect the bone's ability to remodel and repair. And so if you think about a runner, especially who's doing a lot of repetitive impact and repetitive running, and their remodeling system is altered from that hormonal suppression, their threshold of injury is going to be lower than a typical somebody with optimal hormones. And so that increases the risk of overuse bone injuries. So we're trying to shift the nomenclature, the language, to bone stress injury, but that encompasses both stress reactions and stress fractures. And over time, if that bone remodeling system and bone building system is impaired, that can also affect long-term bone mineral density, long-term bone health and bone mineral density. And then we think about those athletes who in their 30s, 40s, 50s have low bone mineral density, puts them at greater risk of fractures and kind of more serious fractures down the road. So the consequences of low energy availability are pretty high. And then you fast forward to some of the work with the REDS group. And so that stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport, like Corinne mentioned, back in 2014. That was their first consensus statement. And then over the next, oh my gosh, it's 10 years now, 10 years, they've evolved and had a couple of updates and a more recent, pretty impactful consensus statement back in the fall that had, I can't even remember how many articles, 6 or 7, maybe 8 associated articles. So if you really wanted to go down and do some nice reading on the topic, we have plenty of resources for you. But some of the important changes is they changed their diagrams to be really snazzy, some fun new colors, but also some really important updates and just some of the physiologic consequences specifically from low energy availability. And what the REDS group also really enforced in, sorry, I've got a puppy that just came through. What the consensus statement also really wanted to enforce was this performance consequence. And I think that's important for a lot of athletes to realize is low energy availability isn't just about these health issues that if they're not actively experiencing the health issue, it's probably not going to be on their radar. However, if they start to feel a little bit of a performance decline, they're like, hard stop, what's going on? What do I need to do to address this? And they might listen up a little bit more. So the updated consensus has the health and performance diagram. And some of the other interesting updates that they found is it's not just low energy availability, but there's also this concern for low carbohydrate availability. And it's shocking to even think about that athletes and runners might be undercarbing. I don't think that's a verb, but I like to use it as a verb. But
we dig it.
they are, a lot of them are undercarbing, and so they're not meeting those carbohydrate goals, especially for the amount of activity that they're doing. And the theory is that there's this compound effect from the low energy availability and the low carbohydrate availability that can affect bone turnover markers. It can also affect inflammatory markers, and that's no good for an athlete that's trying to recover and get back to their next level of training. And there are a lot of different trends in the running world, actually just the fad diet world around carbohydrates, and carbohydrates can get a bad rap sometimes. But I would say for an endurance athlete that's going to be pushing their body, they need those carbohydrates. And I know Keely can go on a soapbox on this, and so I'll give her the mic as well. Or maybe we can just do another podcast on carbs at some point.
Carbs are king.
Carbs are king and queen.
Yeah, but we've started to think of, I think, how I've always reflected on LEA and REDS and overtraining, which is like the only differentiator there is like probably LEA being the differentiator. But this idea that the athlete is struggling with a metabolic injury, and then how you work with that athlete is different, i.e., if an athlete come in with a bone stress injury, you've got to identify like, okay, is this a metabolic injury, or is this a mechanical injury, or is it a combination of both? Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm probably jumping in if Keely wants to add something here, but just like the idea of like when you take that in the clinic, right? And you've got maybe they're post bone stress injury, or it's a collegiate or youth athlete population in a preventative manner. But I'm wondering how you then work with those populations, either maybe both post bone stress injury, saying, hey, what is this? How do we negotiate what's going on here? How do we navigate it? Versus the preventative work of saying, hey, we know this is a vulnerable population. How can we make sure they don't get to the bone stress injury part of the timeline? That's where my mind goes in both directions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll let Keely chime in at some point, but I think that I know it sounds a little bit more, not like a cop out, but it's often multifactorial. So like a lot of factors can contribute to that development and that athlete's risk profile. Biomechanical. When I say biomechanical, I often mean weaknesses in certain muscle groups. So usually in the hips and glutes, and like in women especially, hips, glutes, pelvis, hamstring. I think that we're just at like our development of those muscles it just takes more work. And so we need to be more diligent about the strength training. And I need to practice what I preach as well during those times, because I think as runners, we're kind of like, the strength training, I'll just like do a little like light TheraBand exercise and then I'm good. But I think oftentimes it requires more than that. And so we think about the biomechanical contributors, because if the muscles aren't firing and they're not working, those bones are going to be taking more load. But then when we think about the low energy availability factor and that metabolic factor and that contribution, then they're really, that's something that's really going to be putting them at that greater risk, especially if it's kind of that prolonged period. So there are, especially in endurance athletes, there will probably be inadvertent periods of low energy availability states, even within day, because of the inability to fully fuel and stay on top of that intake. And I know, Keely, you've done work on this as far as just the amount that you can consume and take in the like multi-hour endurance training effort. And so how are you going to make up for that and make sure that you're at that energy balance? You're not going into the next week at a state of energy deficit. Or when I talk to my athletes in the clinic, it's like, you don't want to go into that next training block, that next workout on an empty tank. So if the fuel is empty going in, you're already putting yourself at risk, and you're also probably not going to feel great. And that fatigability factor thrown into the biomechanical and the low energy availability state is all just going to be this recipe for an injury that you don't want and is often preventable.
Yeah, many of us can probably outrun some bad biomechanics, but you can't outrun bad biomechanics when you also don't have adequate fuel on board for extended periods of time.
Yeah, and I just think this is interesting because I think we can evaluate low energy availability on the like day-to-day in the sense that, are they meeting their caloric demands outside of exercise? But I think like with a population like an ultra endurance athlete, you have to take into account if they are fueling during that exercise as well, because there's just no way to make up that caloric deficit if you're not eating during like a 3 or 4 hour run, you know? And so I think that's what's like really interesting about some of the research coming out now about the carbohydrate intake availability or carbohydrate availability, is that like, if you're not getting enough carbs during that exercise, that does have like a cascade effect on hormones down the line, which is just very fascinating. Kind of touching on this a little bit, if someone does come into your clinic with like post BSI, or maybe as like a preventative measure, do you have a certain like blood panel that you like to do for female athletes? And like, what kind of other red flags or warning signs on those blood panels?
Yeah. I'm going to give the typical doctor response and say it depends, but the usual, especially for female athletes, I mean, if it depends on menstrual cycle status. If they're, and also depends if they are on any other form of hormonal contraception, which we can kind of get into as far as the pros and cons. And I know you've gotten into it in the past, but of course, hormonal contraception serves a purpose. So we don't want to just get everybody off of all forms of hormonal contraception, but there's also non-hormonal forms to be thinking about. But not to take that tangent yet. I often will, I will get blood biomarkers, and I will get a blood panel, and things that I'm looking for that, of course, like vitamin D status, and depending on the season, that will fluctuate, and that it's normal to have those fluctuations, but those fluctuations shouldn't drop too low, and making sure that if they're need to be supplementing, that they are. So checking vitamin D, checking a basic metabolic panel is nice, just to get calcium level. And sometimes I will add a phosphorus to that too, because that can also be an indicator of other health issues. I'll get a CBC. So that's a complete blood count that checks hemoglobin and hematocrit. And you're like, what does that have to do with bone health? So if an athlete's anemic, if they have low hemoglobin and hematocrit and they're running fatigued, that also is going to be a factor and contributor from a biomechanical and fatigability standpoint. But also if they're iron deficient, which is often a cause for anemia, that iron deficiency affects other hormones and just affects the body in a way that I think we're still just scratching the surface as far as what are the different cascades. And there's some great researchers. Trent does some great research, and well, some groups, other groups around the world studying iron and iron status and iron metabolism, and specifically in females. Even just we think about iron status from like blood loss, menstrual cycle, and like just from periods. But there's also just absorption issues, and how is our body's ability to absorb different when we're running longer miles, we're doing more time at some level of a higher stress state, and how do we optimize absorption during that time? So those are some of my basics that I get on every athlete. If they're not having a period, they're not on any form of hormonal contraception, I may also get some sex hormones too, just to see how low they are, and if there's anything else we need to be thinking about, like polycystic ovarian syndrome, other issues that could be contributing to missed periods and/or bone health issues. I think that's my typical panel to start.
Nice. We're like, okay, what can we squeeze in 5 more minutes? We're definitely going to have a quarterly segment with you, just FYI. And then we can be really nerdy. Then we can say, hey, we're just going to talk about this one research paper, or hey, we're just going to talk about ferritin for 45 minutes. Because we can't do that today. I know, you were like, and I just got my blood work done recently because I'm a person who has to get iron infusions because I don't absorb iron orally, which is super fun. And my ferritin is hanging on still. So I get to eke out a little bit more time before I'm on my next infusion train. Okay. But we wanted to talk about kind of like actually Keely posted a story today on Instagram that was a piece of research that had come out kind of looking at menstrual cycle, LEA, REDS, like next steps. Like, what do you do with a collegiate athlete, for example, that's in that state? You know, how do you go about getting their menstrual cycle back, et cetera? Like, you know, is it less training? Is it more carbs? Is it less intensity? What do we do? And it seems like there is some research that's like sprinkling in now what we've seen to work. But I'm wondering, you know, in a classic status, say with like the Stanford track and field team or UCLA track and field team, like what is that next step for a collegiate level athlete? Because we can infer from that. We can be collegiate level athletes.
Yeah. We can all be collegiate level athletes for a little bit. I'm going to say it depends again, based on the severity of the situation. If we're dealing with an athlete with multiple bone stress injuries, with amenorrhea or no periods for many years, low bone mineral density, we measure bone mineral density on DEXA, a DEXA scan, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. It's just a type of imaging that we can check out one indicator of bone health through bone mineral density. Then we're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive with our activity restrictions, our nutrition recommendations, pulling in sports dietitian. If there are some blockers that athlete has to fueling more, then we pull in sports psychology. Very important to make sure that you have all the support systems in place. And of course, at collegiate level, which we're at, right, we have all those resources right at our disposal. So there's one scenario. And the scenario you're probably referring to is the one where it's a little bit gray. Maybe they've missed their period for 3 months. They've had a history of a bone stress injury in the last year. They're clearly under fueling kind of based on their dietitian's calculations. And so I think you touched on a couple, really making sure the carbohydrate intake is optimized, really addressing any within day energy deficits. So making sure that they're fueling consistently throughout the day and not like backloading at the end of the day, which we sometimes see based on just busy schedules, calendaring, or poor planning. And so those are easy, potentially easy fixes. And then actually Keely and I, we've shared some runners, and we've navigated how do we work with an athlete who really wants to do some level of training, but there is concern for bone stress injury. So there is that bone health risk of being at that hormonally suppressed state. And I usually fall on the side of, I want to encourage activity as long as it's not really slowing down progress or causing any long-term harm. And so there is this magic ratio as in there is no ratio of biking, cross-training, some load to help stimulate good bone turnover and bone growth that's still going to allow that athlete to do some training, probably keeping the intensity lower, keeping them maybe away from elevation or higher elevation states that's going to stress their body more, and see what we can do and see how long it takes for them to get to that energy balance. And I'm usually one lab I did forget, and I'm surprised you didn't ask me this, is a thyroid function. So that's also a big.
It's highlighted in our notes actually. It says blood draws ? And then it's highlighted in yellow T3 and LEA relationship ?
Yes, I can't believe. Oh man, if I would have graded myself there, I would have given it myself a C.
Yes, my TSH checked for this reason.
Yeah. So thyroid function is also on my initial panel. And I'm not because I'm always looking for thyroid dysfunction from a primary thyroid, like hypo or hyperthyroidism, but we see for different thyroid levels in low energy availability states, specifically low T3. So both free and total T3 can be suppressed in those states. And these are kind of back to Corinne, this metabolism discussion and suppressed metabolism that we see. And like if you go on Google, like the hormonal axis, you can see that thyroid axis and how low energy availability is going to suppress the thyroid specifically, and you're going to get those lower levels of circulating hormones, which for a clinician is helpful because then I'll use those hormones to track over a period of time. And there will be fluctuations in an athlete, that's just normal fluctuations, but I will see a response and a return to that thyroid into the normal range. Usually there's also an associated, if they are without period and on hormonal contraception, we'll see also improvement in their estrogen level. And that's exciting for an athlete to see too. They're like progress, and their body's going through those changes too. And they hopefully will start to feel that energy return that they didn't realize. Sometimes they don't even realize how low energy they are as far as just how their fatigue. And so I'll do close monitoring of those hormones, and then make sure that those aren't being affected by increases in training volume. And the big question is, do you wait until the period comes back in order to really take it to that next level? And my response is, I think that the period return varies so much from an individual to individual, and also depends on how long they were without period. So if they were without period for many years, it might take some time for them to get back to getting that return of a period. So it's very individualized as far as what activity level I'm okay with. We might be doing more biking, less impact activity, just to really protect the bones during that time, incorporating strength training to still do some bone building activity without the repetitiveness of impact. So it's kind of my short response.
And I think I've emailed you about this a lot of just like, okay, I think I'm going to increase their load, but like, they have to eat the entire time. And it's like a non-negotiable. We're like not allowing this person who has very like intricate metabolism to like get into this starved state, right? It's like, even if we're letting you now run for 2 hours, it's like that needs to be some time where you're fueling the whole time. And I think that's been like helpful, at least like for some of the athletes I've worked with, to let them get to that higher endurance level of exercise, but like making sure they're not getting into that like starvation state where their body starts kind of like breaking down calcium and releasing into the blood and all this kind of stuff that would be obviously very disadvantageous for an athlete coming back from LEA.
Yeah, and I've sent them to dietitians too, just like to like a good. There are a number of good like sports dietitians in the trail and ultra running space in particular, or like at least in the endurance space, and it's been nice to kind of have someone else also keeping tabs or establishing nutrition goals for an athlete who might be working through this exact same phase. We have 2 questions before we let you go because we're running up on our clock here, and we want to ask kind of the same question, but reflect on a younger audience. We have a lot of parents that listen. We have a lot of youth coaches that listen. Anthony Costales, I'm talking to you, our high school and middle school track and field coaches that are listening. What is the approach when you're looking at younger athletes, youth athletes, et cetera, those middle school, high school aged athletes who might be experiencing LEA and some of that fallout, even as, a 14-year-old?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you brought this topic up, because I have been talking a little bit more of the advanced collegiate level athlete. And it's not like it's some of those, I take similar approaches as far as from the clinician side of those younger athletes come into my clinic, maybe a little bit less aggressive with trying to push a return to sport. But for a coach and for a parent, I mean, you are the lifeline. You are communicating with these athletes on an almost daily basis, a parent, but for coach, almost daily basis. And those athletes look up to you. I mean, sometimes they come to the doctor and they may grimace with some of the soapboxes that I get myself on, but I think the coach has a really unique position to be able to share this information. So I think making sure that the athlete is informed. So start of the season, sharing the information, whether it's giving handouts. We have a lot of awesome handouts through FASTR. We're also doing a high school team talk, which is virtual in a couple of weeks, and we're so excited about it. But we're just sharing information to parents, coaches, and athletes to try and get them to understand that these conversations should be normalized, and it's okay to talk about food and the relationship with the period. But I think it's important to be able to set that stage and build the trust with the athlete as well, and not just kind of go out of the blue and start talking about menstrual cycles, especially from a male coach. Speaking to female athletes, you need to build that relationship with your team. And on another note, I lost my train of thought there. Body image and body talk. I think that there's fortunately been some great progress to go away from body talk, but I think it can also be very harmful still, and it's still being done if an athlete's starting to talk about or notice changes in her body compared to another person's body, because puberty is going to affect athletes at different stages and very differently. And that athlete needs to learn to be patient during that process. And that coach needs to understand to be patient also during that process. So that could be not pushing the volume, not pushing the mileage, allowing that athlete to have their body change in a natural way, where we're not trying to, sometimes an athlete tries to stop or fight puberty in a way where they don't want to get their period because they don't want their body to change in this way. And that's an important normal process for many, many reasons, one of which being you're building bones and it's a really important bone building time. And I think that there are, thankfully, have been a lot of advocates for this. Lauren Fleshman in her book really gets into this. And I think there are a number of others that have talked about just patience during puberty. Those coaches need to be patient during that puberty process as well. And parents need to be a supportive person, providing those carbohydrates and that fuel in their life in a way that it's that healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. And I think because it is such an important bone building time for these young athletes, do you find that your treatment would be more aggressive with them in the sense that you would be more restrictive of their energy or of their exercise time so that they do make sure they go through puberty, or is it still a case by case? Or
yeah, I'd say just anecdotally, I'm a little bit more aggressive with activity. And some of these athletes are often doubling up. They're doing soccer and track and field or multiple sports at the same time because they're really talented. And there is this pressure, and that's what other athletes are doing. So I really I'm pretty aggressive about single sport at a time, not single sport specialization throughout the year, but at least during season. And I am a big advocate for taking recovery days and rest days. The number of rest days I'm more aggressive with in the high school world. I mean, some of these athletes still run 7 days a week. I don't think that's necessary or safe or good for body and for development and allowing recovery and repair processes to happen. So I'm a lot more aggressive with rest and recovery. And some of these athletes, I'm for the next year, your cap is 4 days a week. And that's just what your body, I feel can tolerate, because without that, injuries, your energy availability is dipping. And I think as far as the physiology process, and kind of going a little tangent, I think that there's just more vulnerability to some of those perturbations. And you need to build up that resilience. And in their 20s, 30s, I think it's a little bit of a different picture than in the high school range, where we just should be more cautious about volume, especially.
Yeah. Again, new quarterly interview co-host is going to be Dr. Emily Krauss. We've got you hook, line, and sinker now. You'll be our special guest. It'll be amazing because we're constantly this is not medical advice. Hashtag. And so now you can be our medical advice. This is fantastic. So I hope there's a lot of science, hopefully not too much doom and gloom. Emily Krauss makes everything very sunshine. So I don't think any of it can be doom and gloom, even if it's serious. But because of that, let's end with one final question. And that's just what are you most excited about? That could be looking at research, looking at sport, looking at what's going on in the running world. What are you, Emily Krauss, most excited about right now?
Oh, well, I mean, we're just coming off the NCAA March Madness and the women's championship at the viewership and the number of viewers outdid the men for the first time. And I think that's just a testament to the progress that's happening. And so I want us to ride on that momentum for the rest of the year and find ways to incorporate that into trail running, into other sports that are coming up. There will be more tournaments. There's this really big tournament called the Olympics coming up in the summertime.
Paris 2024.
And I'm so excited about that, from just women's representation. Sounds like gender parity might be reached this summer. So I'm so excited about seeing women crushing, seeing some women leaders, from physicians to other, just in the sports space. So let's shout out to that. And I think keep doing our part in whatever little or big way that we can to keep pushing this needle forward.
All of a sudden, we're going to see Emily Krauss at the Paris Olympics as one of the team physicians. Well, okay, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. This was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully we can dive a little deeper in some of those topics down the road. This was fun.
Alrighty. We meant it when we said it. We want to have Emily back, maybe quarterly. If there's a topic that you would love to hear us deep dive with Dr. Krauss on, slide into our DMs. Let us know what you would like us to dig in with her, because we think that she is going to be an amazing continuing contributor to the Trail Society podcast. So yeah, slide into our DMs. Let us know what you would like to hear us dive into next with Emily. Before we let you go, we obviously have to dive into Society Slam. And by doing so, we got to give a major shout out again to the feed, www.thefeed.com/society. Go get your credits. Hillary, I know that you had a big win, I think, when it came to eating this past weekend. how'd you make fueling count?
Oh yeah, totally made it count. So for like the shorter races, I mean, I don't feel like this during 100-mile races, just because I feel like I just have to fuel a little bit differently. But this one, I was targeting 80 grams of carbs an hour, and I hit it, and I felt like it really made a difference just overall in my, obviously, like the energy during the run. But the biggest thing that I noticed is that it was like in the days prior, or the days after, I didn't notice as much. Like I felt like I recovered. I felt like it just helped kickstart my recovery. Like there was less muscle soreness, and maybe that's just me, but I think that there's some science to back that up. And yeah, it was really cool. And the proudest moment, I think, is like I still had, I was using the Martin like 160s, and so I could either take half and then like save the other half, or take it all at once. And I was fueling right until the very end. So even like that last like 30 minutes of the race, and I was like, all right, gotta get it in. Let's go. Let's round out this. Let's get my stats up there. So that was really cool. Yeah. And I like those gels that have a lot like of the carbs in one packet. So I just I don't have to worry about it.
The 120 to 160 range for a gel, I used to be like, man, that is maybe too much. I think it's like I think it's helping to tie us over and really help us hit those kind of what seem like really high carbohydrate consumption amounts. But I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it work, which is really cool.
Yeah. Me too. I don't really want to have another one anytime soon, but still, maybe in a few weeks I'll be able to use those again in training.
Yeah, I mean, I ate spring energy flavors that I'm not a fan of out on the race course on Sunday, and I was like, nope, give it to me. I need it. Like, I slammed one in the aid station. I was like, I need it now, and I was like, good job, Corinne. That is 6 months ago. You were not going to do that. Keely, can you take on this Society Slam?
Sure. Yeah, we have a shout out about postpartum running. It goes like this. Thank you all for talking about postpartum return to running. Just wanted to make a suggestion on a book that was pivotal for me 2 years ago. There's a proper guide on all sorts postpartum, from exercise return to random issues. It's by the brilliant Emma Brockwell, called Why Did No One Tell Me? Highly recommend. Keep fighting the good fight. You ladies inspire me. So that is a tried and true, apparently, book from someone in the community that has been postpartum and found a book helpful. So for anybody who is going through that journey, check that out. We don't have any experience with it, so thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah, we hear a lot about the fourth trimester, but none of us can speak to it. So thank you for sending in those suggestions. I know, Keely, you were only at Gorge for a second, but I know this weekend I felt the Trail Society love out there. We got like in-person slams and shout outs, and it was just really so many people running. Like we had an out and back on the Gorge course for 8 miles total, 4 miles out, 4 miles back. And I don't know, half the people I passed were like, Corinne, love the podcast. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. So I think that is like becoming a more universal experience for us, particularly when we race in the US. And yeah, just want to give you guys a lot of love, because it does make it feel pretty special out there. Hillary, it sounds like you experienced something similar out at Sonoma.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite moments on the trip is that this guy, Kyler, who I ended up running with for like about 15 miles. He was running behind me for a bit, and then it wasn't until I don't know what it was, but he realized, because I think there were some people yelling. They're like, "Oh, I love the podcast! Like you guys are doing awesome!" And then he's like, "Oh, I didn't realize that was you." He's like, "I use your feed code." I'm like, "Awesome! I hope you like the podcast too." So we were like kind of chatting about that, and then just all like as we caught up to different runners, it was really nice to hear all that feedback. So yay.
Thanks for giving us 5-star reviews in person. And if you wouldn't mind heading over to whatever platform you're listening to this on, give us a 5-star review there. That'd be really helpful. Subscribe, share it with your friends. That's how more people find the podcast. And even if you hate the podcast, use our feed code, because that benefits you and it benefits us. And more snacks for everyone. We love you all. It's been really amazing to get to share a lot of these moments with you, and we can't wait to share more this season. Race season is on. And until next time, we'll see you out on the trails.